Hey y'all, welcome to Autumn Reads at Tome. Today I wanted to sit down and talk about the longest standalone books that I've read, I would say over the last 5 years, that I've been good about tracking my reads on Goodreads, and I've been using Fable over the last few years. So I'm really only going to talk about books that I've read probably in the last 5 or so years. Also, I'm going to talk about books that are 500 plus pages. It has to be at least 500, nothing just under. And also, nothing in a series. I'm only doing standalone. I will just say there are a couple that have spin offs, so if you want to call that a series, I guess you could, but I don't. So I'm here to talk about books that you can read as a standalone and get everything that the author intended from the story. And then if you want to go ahead and read the spin offs, you can. The point of this video is to just talk about the longer books that I have personally completed. Also, I'm not including DNFs. This is to talk about the books that I've finished and whether, in my opinion, I think they're worth your time to read. Obviously, you can take that with a grain of salt because all of our reading tastes are different, but it's so daunting sometimes to look at a book that's 800, 900, 1,000 pages and think, like, how am I going to conquer that when I've got all these other books I want to read? Like, I'm just never going to do it. You can do it, I promise. But big books don't have to be scary. You just have to take your time. Even if you read 10 pages a day, you will finish the book. And there's such a rewarding feeling that comes with finishing. It's like running a marathon, mentally, that comes with reading a longer book. These are my takes on these books. So let's start with the two that are on the border of breaking my own rules. So the first one is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And I read this a couple of years ago around the Christmas season as part of the Game of Tomes book club. Little Women is just like a warm hug of a book. You follow the March sisters, the mother, the love interests, the friendships. It's just such a wonderful story of sisterhood, family, what it all means. And it's a great book to read around the holidays because a lot of parts of the book take place over the years at Christmas time. And it was just, I loved every moment of reading that book. I would highly recommend it if you're just in a cozy mood. It was written for a younger audience too, so there's nothing in it that is hard to follow. The language is easy. The story is addicting. It's just a good one. It's just a comfort to read Little Women. Obviously, you feel a lot of emotions while reading it because a lot happens in that book. But it's just so good. I highly recommend it. And I'll put the page counts too for each book, and I can go ahead and put my star rating too. Why not? Also, now's a good time to say, go grab yourself a hot or cold beverage. The second one that is kind of on the border of cheating would be Lord of the Rings. It's the foundation for a lot of the fantasy that I like to read. I don't think it is credited as like the original fantasy. Obviously, all of the creatures existed, some in mythical stories before Tolkien, wrote The Lord of the Rings. But it's just an amazing journey that these characters go through. Sam, we all deserve a friend like Sam, honestly. Sam and Frodo, their journey once the group separates is just, they're such good friends that it is so convincing when people say that they were a couple because I could see both sides. When you read the book and the way they talk to each other, the way they think about each other, I mean, it gives me chills to think about a friend that could be so devoted to you and love you so much and want you to succeed in your endeavors. The Lord of the Rings is so special to me. I did not love every minute of reading it because sometimes Tolkien goes on these really just unnecessary descriptions of like the environment, which like it's fun sometimes, but like I can only read so many hills that you're gonna go over, or how much feet of snow you're walking through. Like there's only that can only go so far with me. I don't need like 3 pages of descriptions of the green trees. But the moments that are so iconic in the movies, they're there in the books too. They're just even more iconic. I will read and reread it over and over and over. I can't wait till my son gets old enough for me to read it to him. I just love it so much. I really do. The next one is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one is such a hit or miss for people, and I know that people can find it really disappointing because it gets so into the technical language, like the writing, at least like the history of specific words and language in general. I thought it was really interesting. I've heard people say that it should have been just like a nonfiction book about the history of different languages and the way that we derive words, like the roots, the meanings, and all of that. She just goes into that so much that it's like that's what you really wanted to write, but you created this story about this character Robin instead. And I really did enjoy the story. I'll just tell you, the ending was disappointing. I was disappointed by the ending just because you go through all of this build-up with these characters, and at the end it's just like she just like tosses the ending at you like this is what was always going to happen, basically. I loved some of the characters. I don't want to say too much because it's really easy to spoil this book, and one of the reasons that it's easy to spoil is because some of the foreshadowing is so on the nose that I thought it was a red herring when I was reading the book. I was just like, you're just telling me the ending right now, like a third into the book. I still really did enjoy the book. I liked the characters. Just some of the directions that the plot went weren't my favorite. So basically, if you like to read dark academia books, this one might be for you because it really does focus so heavily like on academia. It really does. And if that's the sole reason that you're going into it, then I think you will like it. Next is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I ultimately liked this book, but there's a part of me that thinks I've convinced myself that I liked it. I read this book when I was in the midst of postpartum depression. It was like the only thing other than keeping my newborn alive that I was looking forward to as something that I needed to do because it was part of the Game of Tomes book club, and I thought to myself when I was in it, like, I have to do something other than just sit here and feel a sense of dread it was just so. If you've ever been through postpartum, you know what I'm talking about. There's times in the day when you feel like everything is fine, and then just like, I don't know what it is, just a flip of a switch, all of a sudden you just feel hopeless. You just feel everything drain out of you, and I don't know what it was. I eventually started to figure out that it was happening around sunset, and I think it was just the fact that I was so sleep deprived going into the night knowing that the sleep deprivation wasn't going to end. That really, really took a toll on me. And so reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell just helped me have something to focus on. And so I think because of that, it was almost like a trauma bond between me and this book. So I posted a video a while ago about books that people DNF a lot. And this was one of the books that people DNF. And I can see why. Because it has all this promise of being a book about magic in England when magic has been a historical thing that people study but they can't actually perform. And so Mr. Norrell is performing magic, and he's teaching Jonathan Strange as his student, essentially, as apprentice, how to perform actual magic. And it sounds like it could be really cool. Like, there's this scene where they go to, I forgot what, it's like a famous building in London, and I don't know why I'm forgetting because it's a scene in the book where he makes the gargoyles come to life and start talking because there's people in the town that don't believe that he can perform magic. So he's like, okay, I'll show you. And so he does. He brings the gargoyles to life. And it's just like, it's cool. There are moments where like you can really see the magic. And the villain of the story is a fairy who likes to kidnap people in their dreams. And so basically they never get to rest. Like, they have to work during the day, and at night their consciousness is stolen from their bodies, you know. Or maybe it's their physical body. I'm really not sure how that works. But, like, there's things that make it so interesting. But for some reason, I think it was just longer than it needed to be. So if you like long descriptions, then I think you will like this book. But the thing is, like, there's not enough of the actual fantasy element for the book to be as long as it was. I will say it's not one that I can highly recommend, but I personally liked it because it helped me get out of postpartum depression, basically, by giving me something to focus on. Hi, sweetie. I feel like I'm starting off on a bad foot with all these. Man. Okay, so the next one is Zone Q84, Haruki Murakami. I will just tell you right now, unless you want to read descriptions of female anatomy for no reason in the middle of a thought point in the plot on almost every single page of the book, don't read this. There are a couple of major plots that we follow. There's two main characters in this book. We switch back and forth between their POVs. And I can't really say too much if you don't want to be spoiled for this book and actually plan on reading it. This book has traveling to different dimensions. It has cult leaders that control a lot of the happenings in the world. It has magic. It has kind of romance, ? But mostly it's just two people trying to find each other because they felt a connection as children. And there's no real basis for their romance at all, other than the fact that one of them was nice to the other when they were about 10 years old. And then the rest of the book is just boobs describing how minors are perfectly hairless down there. These people that they call the little people, they're about 2 inches tall, I think, from what I remember. And the whole book, we are trying to evade them. And they only come out, I believe, at night. Man, I really am not doing this book a very good description because I think I'm trying to, like, forget about it. By the end of the book, major conflicts are just totally forgotten about. I don't think it's much of a spoiler. So there's this friend that one of our main characters has that dies in the story. And all they can think about at the end of the book, instead of talking about the major plot point that led us to where we are, instead of talking about that, all we're remembering is the anatomy of our dead friend. Don't read this unless you want to forget about the plot that you're trying to follow and only give a damn about women because of their anatomy. The next one is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. This is easily in my top 3, maybe 5 books of all time. I really just loved this story so much. I like family sagas. I'm a sucker for them. There's another one on this list as well we'll get to. I've said on this channel that I'm not a religious person, but I did like the parallels that Steinbeck draws between Cain and Abel, and just the way that family trauma really does continue through the generations. My favorite character was Lee, the house caretaker. Just some of the wisdom that he shares throughout the book are things that are so easily quotable. I kind of want to put like one of his quotes on the screen. I just loved following this, it's the story of brothers. It's the story of trying to find success in a world where things just beat you down constantly. And there's a lot of pain in this book. There's heartbreak, there's love, there's laughter. It's just such a good story. Like, if you like reading about families, you'll like this book a lot. And I really did. And I'll think about it for a long time. So the next one is the other family saga that I will recommend on this list is The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende. I haven't read any other of her books yet, but I have absolutely got to, because this book, there are some moments that are disgusting. I'll just tell you, like, look up the trigger warnings for sure. This book made me fall in love with magical realism. Clara is just, oh my gosh, amazing. I loved her and her daughter. I loved following the family, everything they go through. The movie is good. If you like, obviously we love Meryl Streep, but it did not do this book justice. There's so much that happens over 3 or 4 generations in this book. And it's just incredible. I really can't. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling it, because it feels like something major happens so often. If you like family sagas and if you're a very character-driven reader, I highly recommend giving this one a go. If you can get over some of the trigger warnings at least. This book also has a lot of pain, because just history can be rough. It's hard to be a young woman in a country that really, really prioritizes men as landowners, businessmen, working class, politicians. This book just really highlights what it's like to be a woman in a world that is built for men. It really does. And I really, really enjoyed it a lot. And I actually kind of want to reread it. But there's so many other books that I want to get to that I just don't have the time right now. Unless I stop prioritizing other things and pick it up. Which I might do. I don't know. The next one is Middlemarch by George Eliot. This one I also read for the Game of Tomes book club. And I will just say, this book really is long for no reason. This book is kind of like a Jane Austen in the sense where it's a bunch of young ladies, in England in the 1800s trying to find husbands. But a lot of it is just focused on town drama. Everybody's talking about everybody else's lives, and, people don't focus enough on themselves in this book. If you like reading about just like mundane small town gossip, then you will like this. But I will tell you that the pacing, it's like 800 pages or something. I'll put it here. For how long it is, that was not enough to keep me interested. I kind of had to force myself through this book because it was part of the book club. The writing itself is beautiful just because of the timing. Like, if you like that classic English style writing from the 1800s, you'll probably like it. If you're looking for like hard-hitting plot points, you're not going to get it with this. And another thing that's weird about it is it does have an age gap romance. And in the beginning, you're like, maybe I kind of get it. And then by the end, you're just like, girl, why? It was all right. If you like the things I mentioned, then maybe you could pick it up. But if not, yeah. So, okay. The next one, I really should have done these like in the order that I enjoyed them, but I didn't. So the next one is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. This might be my favorite book of all time. If I had to name one, I don't know. It just might be. It's one of those books that is so daunting because I think it might be the longest on this list. But this book, I don't want to say it changed my life because that sounds so dramatic to say about reading a book. But following Edmond Dantes through this story, everything that happens to him from the beginning to the end, his transition. He starts off, just a sailor in a small town in France, and he has this woman that he's in love with, and they want to get married, and they want to start their lives and, just have a simple life and have kids and settle down, and he can work a job. But there's a bunch of people in this town that are very, very jealous of him and his success at a young age. And they work together to basically ruin his life and get him imprisoned. And they succeed. So he's in prison for, I think it's like 13 years, where he is mentored by this old man who, if you've seen the movie, one of the movies, the Abbey, he's played by the man who played the original Dumbledore. And so that's just, my heart just goes out to him because of that. But the Abbey teaches him, how to escape the prison and tells him about the location of a very large treasure. And where we go from there is one of the greatest stories of revenge that I have ever read and may have ever been told. I don't know. That's a bold statement. If you like revenge, if you like adventure, you just follow this crazy amount of characters throughout this story. And man, what an adventure. What a time. Even though it is one of the longest books I've ever read, if not the longest, I didn't want it to end. And when a book is that long and you don't want it to end, it's good. I was just devastated when the story ended. Oh. And that's all I'll say. The next one is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I don't remember very much about this book when I was reading it. It takes place in Nazi Germany during World War II. And we follow this little girl. I think her name is Liesel. And her family, I think her family dies in the war. And so she's raised by this old woman and man who do their best, but they're not very present because they have their own lives to worry about. And she makes friends. She learns about the Nazis. One of the interesting things about this book is that the narrator is Death himself. So you already know from the beginning of the story that tragedy will happen. I mean, not just because it's in Nazi Germany, but because it's told by Death himself, something is going to happen. And it does. I remember crying, sobbing while reading this book. And that does not happen to me very often. So as much as I'm forgetting like the nitty-gritty details of the story, I do remember the emotion. And I believe this book was also written for a younger audience, so it is very easy to read. The language is not difficult. And I highly, highly recommend it. If you like reading about history, if you like books that bring out emotion in you, then I would give it a go. The next one is Project Hail Mary. I read this a few years ago when it was really, really hyped up, and I really liked it a lot. I like sci-fi. I like biology. And I'm excited to see the movie that's coming out soon with Ryan Gosling. It's about a nerdy school teacher who basically gets picked to go on the ultimate space journey to save planet Earth because our sun is dying. And there's the details within, and we may make some friends along the way. I highly recommend this one if you like sci-fi, if you like adventure, if you like witty writing. Next is The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I really, really loved this book. It was the first Russian classic that I ever read, and it holds such a place in my heart now. I don't think you should make the mistake that I did of having this be your first Dostoevsky, because there were sections in the book that were pretty long. I mean, like up to 100 pages long, where I was just bored to death, because we switch POVs between 3 different brothers because their father has been murdered and we're trying to figure out who did it. So it's kind of like a murder mystery, and we follow the different brothers who have very different beliefs and morals, and you keep starting and stopping at different points in time through the story following these different brothers. And it's a really interesting story, but some of the settings that were dropped into are just not very interesting to me personally. So if you're not used to reading very descriptive settings, I don't know if this would be for you. But if you just like following different stories, if you like murder mysteries but you want something that's even like on a bigger scale, then I would give it a go, because it really is good. I mean, I wouldn't say it's in my top 5, but it's maybe in my top 10. It's definitely one of those books that I feel like proud to have read. Next one is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I don't think I can stop talking about this book. Obviously, I posted a two-part reading blog about it last year, which is combined almost 3 hours of content. So I think you know, based on that alone, that I really did enjoy this book. I don't think I've ever had a dystopian future make me feel so unsettled. That book is so relevant to what we're experiencing today that it literally gives me chills to the bone. We jump in time. We start at the 1800s and we jump forward in time like 50 to 100 years usually, about 5 or 6 times. And then once we get to peak distant future, like post dystopian, like what is post dystopian? Then we start to move back in time. And the interesting thing about moving back in time once you've gone to the future is that the past now becomes the future. And it is just a mind warp going through this book, trying to figure out what's going to happen and then having it unfold for you. I felt the full spectrum of emotions. Sometimes books make me feel angry or sad or scared or, cuddly and romantic. This book made me feel all that and just like a deep sense of dread for the future of humanity. Do with that what you will, but it was a life-changing read. If you can get past the first third of the book, because I will say the beginning kind of drags a little bit while you're trying to figure out what's going to happen. Once you've realized where the book is going, it just becomes a whole nother beast, and it's just so much to think about. The last one that I'm going to talk about fiction-wise is The Reformatory by Tananarive. This was my favorite book that I read last year. I just got into horror over the last couple of years, and if you like ghost stories, if you are interested in Black American history, I highly recommend this one. It was a story where we switch narratives again between a brother and a sister. The little brother, he's about 12 years old, I think. His sister, her name is Gloria. He sees a white boy trying to come onto her in public and kind of harass her sexually. And so to defend her, he goes up to this boy and kicks him. And this white boy just happens to be the son of one of the most powerful white men in town. And so in order to not get him lynched, basically, they agree to place him in a Reformation school called the Reformatory. And this Reformatory is haunted. You follow his narration as he tries to survive being in a haunted Reformation school, but also the people around him that work at the school are awful, horrible people who are just power hungry and disgusting people, to be honest. I don't want to say too much about that because I'll spoil it. And then you're following the sister, Gloria, who goes through her own, horrors of the reality that is being a Black person, woman, man. Women obviously have their own extra set of danger, being sexually harassed. So she goes through her horrors out in the real world while Robbie's fighting his horrors in the school. And there's a juxtaposition between how terrible Black people were treated, and then you've got Robbie fighting the literal horrors that are paranormal. It's a really interesting dynamic. Tananarive's writing is phenomenal. I highly, highly recommend it. It was my favorite book that I read last year. I have 2 that are non-fictions, and they're kind of honorable mentions. One of them is Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe, and this is the history of the Sackler family, the family that a lot of them went through medical school, and they used medical degrees to create and market different types of drugs, which eventually led to the production of OxyContin, which we know is responsible for at least a major part of the opioid crisis in the United States. And it was really just the history of the family, how 3 generations, began with them emigrating as a Jewish family to the United States. And then you just go through the generations, basically, till they become what they are today. And it is heartbreaking. It is enraging. The way that Patrick Radden Keefe writes it there's times you forget that it's nonfiction because he writes it as a story as if it's fictionalized. But it's really just the truth, the history of this family. It was very fascinating, and I can't wait to read something else that he's written because he's written a few other things that I'm interested in. The last book that I'll talk about is The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is obviously a very controversial person, and I personally find him fascinating because he is one of the people who paved the way for like modern atheism. He says that he's a spiritual person. He just doesn't believe in God. And I can see that because there are really beautiful things in the world that you find moving that are kind of unexplainable. And he's more than happy to accept that that exists without saying that there has to be a God, for that. I don't want to get too much into that because this book is not about that. This book is about genetics, biology, and his theory that in order for life to have gotten to where it is, every generation that has preceded us at the genetic level is inherently selfish because of its desire to spawn. The desire for life to continue is something that's existed for billions of years. And he goes into different scenarios, like he talks about like within a family, he breaks down in simple terms how related you are to each person in your family. So like for your child, they're half of you. So, what does half of you, what level does that make you feel to keep them alive versus yourself? Or like the closest level of relation that can exist other than a clone is identical twins, which are essentially clones, but basically, like, if you're a twin, are you more inclined to keep your twin alive than your own child? Type of thing. Like, he just gets into these nitty-gritty, interesting scenarios. And if you're interested in biology or genetics, then I think it's a really interesting read. And he writes in very simple terms. This book is now, I think, almost 50 years old, but it still holds a lot of valuable conversation pieces. That is just my kind of honorable mention that I think is pretty niche. But if it interests you, I do highly recommend it. Well, that is my list of books over 500 pages that are standalones. And I can't wait to get some more on my list and talk about it in the future, maybe for a part 2. It's going to be a long time, maybe another 3 years plus before I get to that. That's all I've got for y'all today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you got some good recommendations out of this video, maybe some things to avoid. Unless you are just a curious person, you might want to see what the hype is about, but you also might want to see what the hate is about. Either way, hopefully you got some ideas out of this video, or if nothing else, at least you got to hear some random person on the internet's opinions about it. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.